Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another Pallavi Market Research video. So we're continuing our discussion today regarding how high interest lending caused financial turmoil throughout history. Today is within the context of the Panic of 1837, a financial crisis that was marked by cheap credit, speculative practices, and hysterical behavior by ordinary Americans. And if you aren't already aware, the early 1800s was a period of rapid economic growth and expansion in the United States. Much of that growth was actually fueled by easy credit and high interest loans. Otherwise known as the Jacksonian era, Americans used their easy credit to participate in speculative investments and land purchases at record rates. Many state banks and private lenders were offering loans at higher interest rates, encouraging speculation in land, infrastructure, and other ventures. The easy availability of credit led to a speculative bubble, particularly in real estate. Our president at the time, President Andrew Jackson, played a major role in the events leading up to the Panic of 1837. His distrust of centralized banking led to him dismantling the second bank of the United States. This decision transferred federal funds from one large federal bank to many little state banks, known as pet banks. Just like the subprime mortgage lenders in 2008, these pet banks in the 1830s issued high-interest loans without looking into you too much and engaged in speculative practices. Both banks, at both periods, were given federal funds to manage, but without the oversight and regulation needed to ensure the stability and consumer protections necessary. These pet banks began issuing large amounts of paper money without sufficient backing in gold or silver, and then lending that money at rates that range from 10% to 25%, and less commonly even higher. So they were issuing fiat money, right, without having gold or silver backing, right? So it was essentially they were just printing fiat, right, which we're very used to today. So they continued to offer the loans despite not having the backing, because it encouraged further investment into the assets they were already lending to, further inflating the speculative bubble they effectively created, right? So if I'm a bank and I meet Paul wants to buy this land. Paul buys this land through getting a mortgage through me. I give him the loan, he buys the land. And then Brian comes over and Brian's like, hey, I just made this deal with Paul to buy his land at a higher price than he bought it before. And so they give him the land to buy, right? They give him the loan to buy it at a higher price. And so this is what creates a bubble, right? Especially with banking and real estate. But at the end of the day, fortunately, the borrowers use that money to heavily invest in land, railroads, canals, betting on the country. Not like what we do today, where we buy second homes in Florida and spend it at the mall, right? So the reliance on high interest loans created this very fragile foundation to our economy. And as tensions rose and people started to pick up on that this is actually where we were heading, Andrew Jackson in 1836 preemptively issued something called the Specie Circular, an executive order that required all government land to be purchased in gold or silver, rather than the paper money his own pet banks were issuing to people. By the way, the majority of the land people were buying from the government at this time was actually owned by the government, meaning the banks were lending your own tax dollars to you, charging you an interest rate on it, and then the money that they make from the sale of the land they get also because they own the majority of it. Guys, this is a market research channel, but that's a great business. And if you can recreate that business, starting country, let me know. Jackson's primary intention, though, with this move was to curb the speculation, right? To slow the economy down. But he had a lot of unintended consequences. The sudden demand for gold and silver caused a liquidity crisis, and his pet banks began to fail as they couldn't redeem the paper money they were issuing with the silver or gold. So people would come to the banks, right? They'd have their silver or gold, they have the paper money and they want to redeem it for the silver or dollars, right? And they don't have it. So panic absolutely ensued, leading to widespread bank runs and an economic collapse. Many banks simply suspended all payments in gold and silver during the crisis and did their best to carry on business as usual, which you could kind of do back then, when you're in, Missouri and the government's in D.C. Like, it kind of be like, oh, we're just gonna pretend nothing changed, right? And that did happen. But over the long term, this system of silver and gold, it built new reserves and it built new trust with Americans again for the banking system. Okay. But ordinary Americans at this time, particularly farmers and laborers, were hit ridiculously hard by this mismanagement. Many lost their savings and livelihoods and land, and banks collapsed, credit dried up, and people really fought back. There were protests and public meetings that were organized, and it's called the panic, right? Because people went berserk, and they were not happy that this was happening to them. So this led to President Martin Van Buren. He had, like 3 years prior, proposed this independent treasury system, and he was elected president and then was actually able to enact it in 1840. And this Independent Treasury Act marked this really significant shift in U.S. economic policy because it aimed to stabilize our economy and prevent future crises like this. So we kind of put our economy into cruise control with this move, right? And with the mid to late 1800s, it was very difficult, steady roads, right? We were just growing industrially pretty slowly, nothing too crazy going on over that period. But ultimately, this Independent Treasury Act removed federal funds from private banks and stabilized the monetary system by holding government funds in the Treasury and these sub-treasuries. We're not going to get too much into details on that today. We can maybe pick that up in tomorrow's video. You guys let me know if you want me to talk about anything, and we'll pick this up again later. See you guys.